Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. My name is Phil Buchanan, and hopefully you are on the line because you want to hear about working with grantees and the Grantee Perception Report. Please know that you can submit questions throughout via the question box on your screen, and really excited to have you all here with us today. In addition to myself, and I'm going to act as host and moderator, my colleague Kevin Boldick is here with me. Grace Nicolette, our colleague, had been billed as a speaker via email but has lost her voice completely, and so Kevin will be stepping in so that you can actually hear from us. We're also really delighted to have with us today Thayer DuPont, who's president of the Longwood Foundation. In that capacity, oversees $22 million in grants to the people, environment, and communities of Delaware and southern Chester County, Pennsylvania. Longwood has completed 2 grantee perception reports and applicant perception reports commissioned from the Center for Effective Philanthropy. Obviously, the grantee perception report solicits the perspective of funded grantees, and the applicant perception report is based on a shorter survey of declined applicants. We're really grateful to Thayer for taking the time to talk with us about his experience, and in particular, he's going to focus on the grantee perception report, the GPR. What we're going to do today is Kevin's going to provide a bit of an overview of the GPR, how it works, what it can tell you, what it can't do for you, and he'll also talk a little bit about a new way of sharing grantee perception reports that we've introduced this year, our online reporting system, which just allows for a more interactive experience on the part of foundations that are trying to make sense of their results. We'll then hear from Thayer about his perspective, and then we'll ask him some questions and get questions from all of you, either for Thayer about his experience or from Kevin about the GPR. If you don't know CEP, just tell you that we're a nonprofit. We've been around for 12 years now, and we focus on providing data and creating insights so funders can better define, assess, and improve their effectiveness, and as a result, their impact. So CEP's work covers a lot more than just the Grantee Perception Report, and I hope you will, if you haven't, visit our website and see that we have a variety of publications that are free for download that are really intended to be helpful to foundation leaders as they think about challenges like foundation grantee relationships, foundation performance assessment, foundation strategy. In addition to the Grantee Perception Report, we have a variety of other assessment tools, including a staff perception report that's becoming more and more widely adopted. We have a blog which I hope you'll read, which engages with a lot of the challenges of foundation leadership and also discusses issues more broadly related to the nonprofit sector. And then we have a major conference every other year that brings foundation leaders together. We just had ours, so we don't have one on the near-term horizon. But in due time, you'll hear about that. So that's who we are. And as I said, today we're going to focus on the Grantee Perception Report. The Grantee Perception Report is a tool that we created we piloted it in 2002 and rolled it out in 2003. And Kevin, who you'll hear from in a moment, was there from the beginning in designing that tool, and it really is about hearing from those you fund, their perspectives on what it's like to work with you, how they see your impact, their relationship with you, your assistance beyond the grant, a wide range of different dimensions. And the notion here, as Kevin will emphasize, I think, is not that the Grantee Perception Report is the be-all, end-all, not like it's going to answer all your questions about performance assessment, but that it does provide really valuable insight from a group of folks who you might not otherwise hear such direct feedback from. So I'll leave it at that, I think, and turn it over to Kevin to go deeper into what the Grantee Perception Report is and how it works.
Great. Thank you so much, Phil. To get started, I want to add one piece to the history of the Grantee Perception Report that Phil was mentioning. When we first were piloting the survey, one of the things that we heard again and again from the folks in the field who are looking to use grantees' perceptions and feedback to help improve their work was that as they surveyed their own grantees, it was really hard to understand what grantees were, what a rating from a grantee on a survey was really about. And so as we set out to develop the Grantee Perception Report, we worked really closely with funders in the field to understand the topics that were of the most importance to them and to create a process in which you would be able to get some sort of benchmarking data to help normalize what are often quite positive grantee perception or grantee survey responses. So what does the grantee survey cover? For those of you who aren't familiar with this tool, the survey, we have a standard survey that we use with the grantees of all the funders that work with us. It's made up of about 50 questions that get at aspects of grantees' perceptions of your impact on your fields or your communities, and importantly, the ways in which you either strengthen or don't strengthen the organizations that you're working with. We look at relationships, the quality of interactions, and the clarity and consistency of communications with grantees. Of course, we look at the application and the reporting and evaluation processes to get a sense of whether those are helpful with grantees, for grantees, and what the burden is of those processes. And for some foundations who are trying to do more than just give grants, we also look at aspects of assistance that you might provide beyond the grant checks and non-monetary assistance for grantees. Now, that's the standard questions in the survey. They take about 20 to 30 minutes for a grantee to respond to. We get great response rates between usually 60 and 80% for these kinds of surveys. But obviously, every foundation is distinct. You have your own goals and strategies and practices and context. And so a big piece of this grantee survey is a customized portion of the survey that we work with you to develop to really reflect your work as an organization and ensure that you're getting the kind of feedback about specific aspects of your work that wouldn't be relevant to other foundations who might be participating in this grantee perception report. So what does the comparative data look like? And as I mentioned, we think that this is a really important piece of the grantee perception report. You can meaningfully benchmark your foundation against the work of other funders who are similar to you. Given that we've been doing these kinds of surveys for about a decade now, the comparative data set that we have is fairly broad. It's made up of 295 foundations representing responses from more than 40,000 grantees from the United States and increasingly around the world. The size of the foundations in our data set range from quite small, making only a few $100,000 a year in grants, to at the high end. Obviously, this is the Gates Foundation with more than $30 billion in assets. And those are just a few of the characteristics of the breadth of our comparative data set. And increasingly, what we've been able to do is really work with individual funders to customize a peer group that is really relevant to anyone who's participating. We have family foundations, corporate foundations, private foundations, locally focused, internationally focused foundations. We've done surveys in English and French and Hebrew and Spanish. The range of responses and foundations captured in the comparative data set at this point is quite immense, and we think that it adds real value to be able to look at your results relative to peers. So why is comparative data so important? Well, say you want to ask your grantees how much impact they think you've had on their organizations, and you see that across your grantees you have been rated on average around a 6. Now, in isolation, that might seem like a really great response. And of course, there's an aspect of this that is great. Most grantees are giving you ratings on the high end of a scale. But put into a comparative context, what we can see is that there's still a range of possibly greater or better results. A 6.0 on this particular question in our data set is only in the 32nd percentile. So what that tells us is that there's an opportunity for improvement. And that's really what the comparative data and the benchmarking is about. It's not about who's the best or who's the worst. It's about normalizing grantee responses, which are often positive, so that you can understand what the range of possibility is, where there might be opportunities for you to improve, where there might be opportunities to share your strengths or to capitalize on them more broadly with individual grantees. So that's the comparative data. Now, all of this data and all of the data in the world is not very important unless it's driving change in organizations. And we practice what we preach. We use a third party, the LFA group, to reach out to folks who've used the GPR to understand what kinds of changes they're making based on the data that they receive from their grantees and the feedback they receive from their declined applicants. And what we see here is that every single organization that uses this tool makes some sort of change in their work based on the feedback that they hear. We see that over 80% of users of the Grantee Perception Report say that they've modified their selection of their reporting processes or changed the way that they've communicated with their grantees. And significant numbers of users say that they've changed the assistance they're providing beyond the grant check or even changed the grant-making strategy, which is a pretty high bar for something like the grantee survey. And I think importantly, 100% of the folks who've used the Grantee Perception Report more than once say that they would recommend it to other funders. And that's where I think that is a real testament to the value of grantee feedback. And on the flip side, what we hear from grantees who are responding to this survey is that they appreciate the opportunity to really, through a third party, give candid and confidential feedback about the important work that they're doing with their philanthropic funders. All of you play important parts in the lives of the nonprofit organizations that are your partners in creating impact. And of course, they have thoughts about what you're doing incredibly well that they'd like to share in a sort of protected environment, and often thoughts about what you can do even better. So one other way to look at whether the Grantee Perception Report provides meaningful information to foundations that are using it or funders that are using it is to look not just at self-reports of change, but to also look at whether grantee ratings can change and whether grantee ratings are changing as folks continue to use the Grantee Perception Report more than once. 90-plus funders, like the Longwood Foundation there, who we'll hear from in just a second, have used the Grantee Perception Report more than once. 80% of them, to give you an example, saw improvement in ratings of impact on grantees' organizations. And that's just one question, but we know that this trend holds true for many of the questions in the grantee survey. So it's not just that folks are reporting change, but grantees are recognizing and experiencing change in their work with their philanthropic funders. At this point, we've been doing this long enough that there have actually been folks who have used the Grantee Perception Report 3 or 4 or 5 times. And we now have almost 40 funders who have used the Grantee Perception Report at least 3 times. And one of the huge questions that we started to ask ourselves over the course of the last couple of years was whether this trend of improved experiences from grantees would continue. And the good news is that we see that it holds stable or continues to improve. We don't see on average declines as folks continue to use the Grantee Perception Report to monitor their performance. And in fact, when we looked at those 36 funders who had used the Grantee Perception Report at least 3 times, we saw an even further increased number of funders who had seen their ratings of grantees' ratings of impact on their organizations rise. And again, that held true for other questions in the grantee survey. So it's great evidence that not only can this kind of feedback fuel change for individual foundations and their practices and processes, but that those changes really matter to grantees in their day-to-day work with their foundations. So I'm going to move now from this sort of overview of the Grantee Perception Report to a very quick introduction of the tool itself and the way that we present it so that you can use an online system to really engage with this kind of information and ask questions of the data that your grantees have provided. As I move to that section, I just want to remind you that you can ask questions at any time, and only we'll see those questions, and Phil's going to be moderating some of the questions that are flowing in, either for CEP or for Thayer when we get to his section in just a second.